Welcome to the Artist Academy podcast, a place where we focus on the business side of art to help you attract more customers, increase profits, to ultimately live a life of creativity and financial freedom. I'm your host, Andrea Earhart, and I'm declaring this week Up and Coming Young Artist Week. This is the second interview we have because I sat down with a couple relatively young muralists recently who have a lot of spirit, and I think you'll enjoy hearing their stories. This episode features 17-year-old Maddie Deiters, and even though she's only 17, don't write her off yet, Maddie has painted thousands of square feet of murals in multiple states. She's a go-getter. And what I took from this is that there is no minimum age to start painting and making art into a profitable career. Maddie applied and was accepted into her first mural job at 13. 13. What were you doing at 13? I didn't even know. I was chasing boys. This chat made me think of how much supportive family and friends play a role in those early years of creating. Outside influences either push us in or push us out of the art world. And this is a very real look into what can happen when we support our children's interest early on. My mind just was wandering into a future glance of what if my kids are really interested in art? If they're not, that's totally fine too. But if they are, this is what's possible. Yeah, they don't have to wait until they're 18 and graduated to get a job if they don't want to. And Maddie wanted to, and she did. And let me know what you think about this week's episode with Maddie Deiters. Hey there, I'm here with Maddie. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Good. So I was just, as we got on here, so I have Artist Academy members given suggestions for who to interview and all the things. And I was very surprised to see that you are 17. And so, because we usually do like seasoned artists who have like a lot of advice, but I'm open to hearing what you have done so far and where you're at right now and what advice you can give even at a young age.
For sure. Yes, this is super exciting. I'm so honored to be on here. So I'll maybe start with giving just a little bit of a background of where I've been and how I started. So yes, I'm 17, but I've been doing murals and in the art business world for a total of just specifically 3 years now, almost exactly. And so I've done between 15 and 20 different mural projects in states such as Illinois. I have an upcoming one in Kansas. I've done one in Missouri, and I've done one in North Carolina. So I have traveling experience and hometown experience, and it's definitely interesting breaking into the world of business from starting from a hobby side. So I think that is something super interesting to talk about and how you can make that transition, which is a kind of a hard transition to make. And so I'm just a professional mural artist currently.
Awesome. Okay. So how did you get started in this? Like you just started to paint large scale, small scale? How did that start?
So as far as art in general, I've always done any sort of art. I am a huge fan of drawing specifically, but my first mural I technically did in my own bedroom. And so I started smaller scale, and I have to be honest, it did not turn out fantastic. And I painted over it like 2 weeks later, but my hometown put out a call for artists, and they wanted a blind jury, and they had about 10 different buildings for people to submit to. And because I didn't know any better, because I was 13 at that time, I wasn't afraid of the fact that if I submit something and get it, then I have to paint it on a building that's 50 feet tall. So that was an advantage of starting young, is I didn't have that fear to shoot for the stars, I suppose. So that was my very first project. I submitted to a blind jury, so they didn't know where I was from or how old I was or my past experience, which I was very lucky for that, and I'm very thankful for that project. Because currently a lot of submission processes, they ask for your past experience and what you've done before to make sure that you're qualified and all of those things. So I was super lucky that my hometown just did a blind jury for anyone that wanted to try. And so that was how I first broke into the market.
How nerve-wracking, how nervous was it for your first one? Or were you just, so I feel like as we grow older, we get more fearful, you know? But when I was young, I remember being like, I can do anything. Sure. Watch me. Like, did you have that? Or were you like, oh my gosh, how the heck am I going to paint this wall?
It was 100% excitement, which looking back, I might have been a little bit naive because there are so many challenges with that wall. There was an electrical line and logistical issues out of everything. But no, yeah, no, I just complete excitement.
That's awesome.
Foolishly.
Okay. And then so you did that one. And then
Mhm.
how did you get the other ones, the other jobs?
So out of that one, my second project sort of spiraled from there. That one has a much more complicated backstory. It's my largest piece. It's 8,000 square feet, which was my second mural, the same summer that I painted my very first
Oh
one.
my gosh.
It
Okay.
was huge and it was right on a highway. There was no space for a lift. We had to coordinate getting the road blocked and all of these things. And it covered some very interesting subjects that I had to do a lot of research to design and go into. So, that being my second one, it's made every job since then seem so easy. It took me 2 months of painting 10, 12, 15 hours a day during the school year, too.
Did you do it all by brush?
Yes, I did brushes and rollers. There was a couple sections with spray paint, but no sprayers or anything like that.
Oh my God.
We
What was the
tried the
design?
whole thing too. It's a very patriotic mural. It has a huge eagle on the corner of this building. And so driving up, you can really see as it expands. On one side, it's a homage to first responders. The fire station is right across the street, which I think is super cool. So we have the police officers into EMTs into the fire station. And then on the other side of the building, it's for different branches of the military and specifically honoring two fallen soldiers of the man that commissioned it for me's friends.
Okay. Awesome. Well, lots of learning experiences. Cool. Okay. So how did you get the other ones in other states?
So, all of my work that I've done in other states was through finding calls for artists online, which was a whole other process. Even though that was my first one, a ton of the ones that I've done around my hometown have just been through word of mouth, which I think is very interesting how different it is from going online and finding calls for artists and learning how to build a resume and a portfolio and letters of reference and letters of interest and designing for a building that you've never been to. For specifically, I see a lot of calls for history murals, and it's really hard if you're not from the town to do all
Mm.
those research and everything. And so the murals that I've done away from my hometown have been solely either RFP, which is request for proposal, or RFQ, which is request for qualifications that I've just happened to get.
Okay. So whenever you're applying for these, do you
Mhm.
have PDFs that you send out or how are you applying for them?
So it all depends. And the lovely thing about that is a lot of times if they're asking for a request for artists, they'll be extremely specific. And it's great to just look at their list. Some people want your resume with only a couple things or your portfolio with only your top 10 pieces. So it really differs, but typically I do have a PDF that kind of has everything that I've done in my past work that I can submit as well. And sometimes it's through a website and sometimes it's through email. I've learned that reading it very thoroughly is very good. There's been a couple times I've made some mistakes from not rereading everything thoroughly.
Yeah. So I just pulled up your Instagram and very cool. There's some here, the flower one. That's pretty
Mhm.
cool. Where it's like you're painting a string of flowers
Mhm.
on a very, very large wall in Illinois. Okay. And then there's one in North Carolina.
Yes,
Okay. And you partnered with a muralist?
that was just me for that one.
Okay. Yeah. Very cool. There was a request for qualifications for that one and you just applied?
Yes. So for the one in North Carolina, there was a request for proposal, but they just wanted a rough sketch. And so I gave them my ideas. And the wonderful thing about that one is there are fundraising opportunities in it as well. They wanted community involvement. So those pictures that are seen in the Polaroids are actually pictures that people from the community submitted. And then I chose which ones I wanted to paint. So it's actual real experiences from the beach there. So I think that's super cool.
Oh, very cool. Yeah, that's such a neat idea. Okay. Yeah. You've had to hop on a lift already. I see a boom lift and a scissor lift in there.
Yes.
Yeah. How was
Lots of
that?
It's the one for North Carolina it was very easy compared to the other ones I've done. Of course, my first mural was 50 feet tall, and so I had to get experience with being okay with that up there. There are some things I wasn't expecting. I always assume that if you're in a lift, it's very secure and structured, but it really shakes a lot, especially if it's windy. Ooh, I would lay in bed at night and you can feel it moving as if you were in the beach all day and you can feel the waves whenever you lay down at night. It's a little scary being up that high.
It
A
is.
little.
It really is. It's just a little uneasy.
Yes.
Okay, so what tips do you have for artists who maybe have sent in a couple proposals to bid on jobs like these, or maybe they haven't at all? How are you finding these proposals or these requests? And how are you? Is there any tips that you've learned along the way?
Hmm. It's a good question. So I find most of the proposals online either on Facebook, that's a great way to search for keywords, or there's a website called Cafe, which is call for artists or call for entry, I think specifically. And so that will have a lot of listings as well. And what I love about the Cafe website is it will show what round of juries they're in and they'll just post updates on there. So you can stay very informed. So yeah, so either that website or Facebook is where I find most of them. And some advice for people that have submitted just a couple or want to submit some. I would say the more that you submit for, the better, because art is so subjective. So if you submit one and you may have the best art out of everyone that's submitted and you may not be chosen. So the challenge for artists is we have to find those people that like our art specifically and their ideals align with ours. And the bigger net that you cast, the more chances that you'll have to succeed. And so if you can, I would say submit for as many as you can, possibly, as you have time for. Personally, I get probably about one job in every 30 that I submit.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So mural, it's a huge market right now. There's a really big push for it. So a lot of people are submitting for everything. And you just have to find those people that like your art specifically.
Yeah. Okay. So you're finding it via Facebook. What are you searching on Facebook? Or are people tagging you in them, or how are you finding them specifically?
Hmm. Just keywords.
What are
Sometimes
those
it'll
keywords?
pop up, such as like RFP, RFQ, call for artists, murals. It's difficult because some proposals are just a call for public art, which can mean many things. So if you're into
Mhm.
public sculptures or mosaics or something, you could probably just search public art and you might have an opportunity for that. Just anything that would align. It's typically call for artists that they'll post out there, which follows
Okay.
it to a website with all the information.
Okay. How long do you think you're spending on sending these in, like per one?
It's a good question. It all depends on how fast my creative process becomes accomplished. I personally have a much better chance with RFPs because I don't have a super vast portfolio. I only have around 15 to 20 pieces. And so a lot of the qualification submissions I won't get because some people out there have 70 jobs they've done with much more expertise in specific styles. So I do RFPs, and I would say each one maybe takes me around 3 hours if I'm making a concept design or just a fleshed out design or some ideas for them, paired with a submission of everything else. It's pretty time consuming.
Okay. Yeah. So I just did it just to see. So I just typed in call for artists and I went to photos and I just scrolled down because for some reason it shows me my photos first. And I was like, no, I'm not interested in that. So, and there's one, it's a RFQ call for artists in the city of Wichita, which is not very far from me. I mean, kind of, it's probably like 3 hours. Yeah. So for anybody listening, I just went to call for artists and then photos. And then there's a bunch of different, do they look like, I mean, there's another one here for somewhere, but I'm looking at like the month of April and May is what the deadlines are right now because I'm looking at it in the month of April. But okay, cool.
There definitely is a best time of year to look for them. A lot of the deadlines will hit January, February, sometimes early March because they want to have their person chosen by summer to paint it in summer.
Definitely. Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Yeah. I remember even just applying for different shows to go into like markets. I found that February even was almost too late
Mhm.
because, yeah, 1 year. But okay. Yeah. Beginning of the year. So I guess just something to think about for anybody who's wanting to apply for stuff like this. Okay. Cool. Okay. What other tips do you have for artists who are wanting to do what you're doing? What's something that you think you're doing well that you can give advice on?
Hmm. I think a huge part of art, public art for me, it's murals. For someone else, it may be some different medium, but it kind of applies for all of them, is the more chances you have to integrate the community, the more impact it will have, and the better you'll succeed with that specific piece. So I've done a couple different ways of involving the community in my art piece. That could even just be posting a lot on social media and getting it shared places so people can see it and it can affect more people. Because that really is, at the end of the day, the biggest goal that someone has with wanting public art in their town is it affecting the community. I did a job where it was a ground mural, and I worked with a bunch of volunteers from the community, and it was a great way to bring kind of two sides of my hometown together, was through public art, and everyone had a wonderful time and just got to know a lot of people that you wouldn't have if you didn't go out to help paint that day. And so the more opportunities for that, I think the better that you'll succeed with that art project and the more people will see it. And another,
I agree with that. So I'm just going to echo that. So I applied for one in St. Louis last year and I didn't get it, but the call for artists, it said that it didn't need a community aspect. It was just like paint whatever you want. I was like, okay, great. I'm just going to paint whatever I want. And then the feedback that I got was, hey, we actually chose the community ones, like ones that integrated. They're like, sorry, we just changed our minds in the meeting when I was like, oh, that's nice. But I was like, okay, that's a lesson learned. Next time I'm just going to, do my style, but also incorporate the area more because then I would have gotten chosen for that one. So that's a good tip.
Yes. Another good tip. It is difficult. Again, with what you're saying, sometimes people change their minds on committees. And so maybe this isn't a good rule of thumb, but I found it has a pretty good success rate. If you see on an RFP or RFQ, like what they would like, if it's just purely beautiful colors or anything like that, or music or dance or history or anything, sometimes people don't know what they want until they can see it. And I wouldn't bet on that. But if you have a good idea how you can incorporate some other aspect, so if it's specifically history and history, but you want to incorporate bright colors or nature or something in a way that you think, oh, maybe they didn't think about this and they haven't seen this idea until I show it to them. I've found that also has a wonderful success rate because people don't know what they want until they see it. And so I think that's important to understand that sometimes the people reviewing the art that you send aren't as good as visualizing as they can be, but sometimes it's harder to visualize something unless you are an artist or you're in this career, you're doing this kind of every day. And so I think that's good to show people their options sometimes. Again, maybe not every proposal that you send out, but if you have a really good idea, I think it is good to go ahead and show it, even if it doesn't 100% align with what they asked for.
Okay. Yeah. You very much come off to me as an artist who doesn't have a grudge against a lot of things yet. I feel like as you do it so long, you're like, like I spend so much time. I don't want to do that. You're like, I'll spend the time. I will do it. I will go after it. I want this. You're going to do a lot of different call for artists things and spend a lot of time, but you seem very excited to, make the customer happy. And I think as we get older, or as we just go along with it, sometimes that fades a little bit because it just gets a little monotonous and it just like kind of wears you down after a while. And it gets artists, especially get to a point where they're like, I just want to paint what I want to paint. I don't want to do what everybody else, but you're very much still in the thing of I'll do whatever you want. I'm having a fun time. And I think that's great. I think it's a good reminder to, please the customer and do that extra step because it does pay off.
Yes. Something that I never expected from getting into the mural career is how much emotional investment it takes. I never understood that would be such a big aspect of it, but it really is, because with every project that you submit, you have to research and you have to understand, because the people that are asking for it, they are so emotionally invested in that project. And one of the challenges as an artist is to come alongside them and help them see their vision for it. And it's difficult because sometimes it's assumed that the artist has just as much emotional investment in that as they are. And so another piece of advice for someone that is submitting a bunch of things is I wouldn't get too attached to it unless you get it yet, because that can be really draining. If you send out 20 different designs and you love each and every one of them like they're your children, and then you get rejections and rejections, I wouldn't take that to heart, because it isn't bad per se. It's just not someone's personal preference. And so if you get rejected, it says nothing about your art, but about what they like to see.
I gotcha. Yeah, it is. It's because I mean, there's such a fine line, and like, we are our art, it's like there's like a piece of us that goes into it, either like our skill or our imagination or our ideas, and just like it's our brushstrokes. And so it's like we are the creator. And so it's like when people are like, no, I don't like that idea, I'm like, but I do. I love it. So I don't, maybe something's wrong with you then. Like, it's like, no, but yeah, no, you're definitely right. So just even the proposal, the design process, the excitement, the letdown, it is a lot, but it's like a fun, wild roller coaster.
Indeed. Sometimes it's not as fun.
Sometimes, yeah. Awesome. So what other bits of advice do you have for our listeners who are starting out, or really even like, we have some moms on here who have daughters or sons and who are interested in art. And I get that question a lot. Like people message me on LinkedIn, like, hey, I see your Artist Academy, and like, how old should my kid be to join? And I'm like, usually I'll be like, as soon as they can get a job, then join. But you started at 13 and you were doing big murals, and that's great. I think it just gives something for even parents with kids listening to this. Like, if their son or daughters have that artistic eye, they can get started earlier than they think. So I think this is just an eye-opening thing for me even. And I know I have some friends who have some 10-year-olds, and it's like, well, you're who helped them on the job. And it's like, well, you could be doing your own in a few years. So yeah, I guess just thoughts on that. Maybe how your parents helped you in this process, or your family, or whoever your support system is.
Yes, my family has been very incredibly supportive. My mom, she is with me on every project I do. Number one, whenever I started, I couldn't be left alone. I was too young. But even now, she will go with me and travel to North Carolina, to Missouri, all the different places, and kind of be my assistant and learns right alongside me. Perhaps she doesn't enjoy the responsibility of doing like blending or something that's really specific to the design, but my parents are very incredibly supportive. My dad has taken off time of work to come and help me paint, and my grandma's come on a job to help me paint some of the fine lines and some of the color blocking areas. So everyone's so incredibly supportive, which is really wonderful, because I did start so young, and I know that I wouldn't have been able to do it without them supporting me.
Definitely. That's so great to hear, because I hear too much that artists don't have the backing of their family because they don't see art as a career, and they don't think, they just need to get a real job. And so just stuff like that. And it's so disheartening, and it makes it so much harder. So it's so great to hear that. I got my artistic talents from my grandmother, who passed down through my dad and to me. Did you get it from one side or the other?
Not that I can find.
Oh, nobody. Okay, so your mom's out there painting with you, and she's like, don't make me blend.
Yeah, exactly.
Props to them. To even like have somebody who doesn't even really understand it, and you're like, here, let me kind of teach you how to help me. Okay.
Yes. Precisely that.
That's awesome. I have a 1.5-year-old son, and I'm like, I don't know if he's going to have artistic abilities. I don't know that it's just because it is kind of an emotional roller coaster career that is tough. And so I'm like, if he doesn't, that's fine too. But it would be really cool to have him painting out there with me. Not at 1.5. That'd be terrible. but eventually. Okay. So what other kind of tips do you have for it? Or maybe just the last one that you could give people, maybe just from your perspective, and something that might help people who at any starting stage want to paint murals in other states or even in their local area.
Something that I didn't learn until maybe a whole year into painting murals is there's kind of two things that go into this. Number one, it's so easy to get burnt out. And maybe that's because I was young and I didn't quite expect the workload that it was. But I think taking some rest time is really important. I don't paint jobs in the winter, number one, because it's cold outside, but I don't even really paint indoor jobs. I kind of have an off season so I can rest and recover mentally to paint all summer long. And then another thing that goes into that, I think making a very clear delineation for yourself between hobby art and career art. Because whenever that line starts to blend and the stress of art as a job leaks into the stress of art as a hobby, because for me, it was always a hobby. It was a way to escape, a way to express myself. Whenever I started doing it as a job, it was a way to express other people. And so I have to make a very clear line about which is which, because I don't want the stress of it as a job to leak into my own personal expression. So I think that's important to understand going into it, that you're not going to be, not every job you paint is going to be for yourself and everything that goes along with that. I don't know if that makes any sense, but having a very clear line for yourself so that you can keep them separate. It's almost like I do two different kinds of art, even though they're practically the same.
Yeah, yeah. Well, hearing that you were working for 2 months, many hours a day, I'm sure it's funny because I think of my younger self, even I'm like, oh, she had so much energy. But really, I mean, anybody working and going to school and that many hours, and you're also painting something new and you're learning as you go. And I think anybody would get burnt out on just working like that. So yeah, I guess it's no matter what stage you are in your career, it's like burnout is even in the beginning, in the middle, more experience, like burnout is definitely a thing because we don't just shut it off after 5 o'clock. It's just, we have the opportunity to paint and we can do it on the weekends and it's a never ending thing. But yeah, you're right. It's a lot, but I would say it's worth it. Are you having a lot of fun with it?
I think so. Something that I love doing is whenever I first started, I always expected that you had to know how to blend and how to do spray paint and how to do everything before you can even start. But I have loved to watch my skill and technique kind of flow throughout these past 3 years. My first project was done with absolutely no blending. It was like a color by number, big sheet on the wall, basically. It was just all hard edges. And as I got more confident in myself, which is super fun to see as confidence grow, I learned to blend and make different perspectives and different subject materials. And my last piece that I did, which was a live piece, so I had to trust that I could get something done in time, I did with spray paint. And so it's fun to watch my technique grow and my opportunities grow along with that.
Very much. Well, you are very well spoken and very positive, and I'm going to be watching. As you know, are you on Instagram? Is Instagram your main one? Oh.
Yes, I have Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook.
Okay, yeah. Well, I'm going to continue to watch you grow because you starting this early. I had people tell me when I started painting murals at about 23, 24, something like that. They're like, man, you're starting so early. I can't wait to see what you're doing when you're 40. And now like looking how early you're starting and you're never going to have a quit your day job, thing because you're starting so early. And that's so great because I have too many times I have conversations with artists who are like, yeah, I really liked art in school. And then I just didn't pursue it because my family told me not to. And then now I'm 35 or older, whatever. And now I have a family and I have all these responsibilities. And now I need to take the leap into artistry. And it's a little bit more difficult. Not to say that any stage is easy and no matter what age or whatnot, but it's just like when you have so many responsibilities with children and all the things, it's just a bit harder. So it warms my heart to see that you are doing it at the age that you're at. And I can't wait to see you when you're 30 and when you're my age and see where you've been and what you've done. And it's very inspiring. So I had my doubts at the beginning of this. I was like, I don't know about the interview. Cause like usually I interview artists who've been doing it for lots of years and they have a lot of stories to tell, but you also do. You've been doing it for a handful of years and your advice was really good. And thank you so much for taking your time with us today to share everything.
It's a lovely opportunity.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Thanks for listening to another episode of the Artist Academy podcast. If you like this art and business talk in audio form, then I want to invite you to get my book. It's called Mural Money: How to Grow Your Art Business from Zero to 6 Figures. So starting from the very bottom, like you don't even have a website yet. You have nothing. You're not sure where to go and you want to make money with a paintbrush. You want to have your creativity pay the bills. I have taken so much of the advice that I've gotten from artists from this podcast. I've been doing one episode for over 5 years now. So many interviews, so many good bits of advice. So I've taken the best of that advice and put it in my book, along with so many stories and lessons learned that I've had in my own mural career of just how I would go back and save a whole lot of time if I just knew these steps. It's a 15-hour audiobook. And so if you like this podcast, if you're listening to interview after interview, I know that you're going to like the book. So go to muralmoney.com. It's for anybody who wants to grow their art business with a paintbrush. Muralmoney.com. And I will see you next week for another episode of the Artist Academy podcast.